Hey everyone, welcome to the Slice of Finance podcast. I'm your host, Jared Taylor. Joining me today, we have the CEO and co-founder at Equals, Bobby Pinero. Bobby, how's it going?
Hey, Jared. Excited to be on.
Excited to have you. Let's dig right in. I would love to kind of hear your background. You've been in Intercom. I would like to go right into the kind of the main problems that made you want to start Equals in the first place. So, what limitations directly maybe impacted your work in the past, and how did Equals come together to help solve some of these pain points?
For sure. Yeah. So the way I describe myself is I've been an analyst with a finance background, but an analyst for the past 10, 12 years. And that's where I spent all my time before starting Equals. And as an analyst over the past 10 years at Intercom and then in roles before that, I'd been pitched every data tool under the sun. Every BI tool, every notebook, every out of the box reporting solution, every SaaS tool trying to kind of take off a component of metrics and automate it or build it for you. And I always found just so frustrated with all those tools. None of them spoke to me. They all, in some way, shape, or form, were trying to take me out of the tool that I loved the most, the thing that I was most comfortable, the thing that I built my whole career off of, which was a spreadsheet. And and so the idea for Equals, it's not particularly groundbreaking or revolutionary. Um, the idea for Equals came from the fundamental thesis that the spreadsheet's right, that people want to work in a spreadsheet, that the spreadsheet's the best way for doing modeling, for doing analyses. It's this flexible canvas on which you can kind of move data around, reformat it, build compounding logic, build essentially programs that help you understand what's happening in your business. And so there were all sorts of times at Intercom that I'd run into issues, whether it was, I tried every BI tool: Mode, Tableau, Looker, Periscope, um, Superset, Chartio, you name it, right? I tried it. And I just always ended up back in Excel. It was always like, okay, we need to model something in some particular way for the board meeting or for the weekly forecast review. We need the business is slightly different than it was 2 months ago or 3 months ago, or we need to apply some other logic or some other assumption. And it was like, okay, I could spend 2 weeks trying to figure out how to kind of force fit this into Tableau, or I can do this in 10 minutes in Excel. Um, and so there were a few times where there was one particular process at Intercom, and it was I wanted to set up this dashboard or this way of looking at the business where we could send it out to the entire company every single day. And for me to do that in Tableau, for me to do it in Looker, for me to do it in like any of these BI tools was like this. I'd have to buy it and set it up and da 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 da. And what I ended up doing was actually creating. This is the time I ended up not in Excel, but I ended up creating a really basic. If any of my CS friends out there or any product engineers ever got a hold of this, they would they'd laugh me out of the room. But I wrote this like multi-thousand line Python script that basically would pull data, format it in the way that I need it, and then send an email out to the entire company every morning, every afternoon. It was at the end of the day. And in order for me to do that, I had to learn Python. I had to buy a Mac Mini. I had to have the Mac Mini perpetually on under my desk. I had to learn how to set up a server, put a cron job on a server. And from that, I was able to build the thing I wanted to. And it was this like really powerful report. It was called the Daily Pulse that would go out to the company. And it changed the way that the company worked. But man, it was hard to do. It took me like weeks of time to like learn how to do that and figure it out and borrow some engineering resources. Da, 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 da. I was like, fuck, what? Like, if I could have done this in Excel, if I could go kind of end to end from database to through analysis to push this into Slack or an email, that would have taken me 10 minutes. And so the idea with Equals was like, is there a way for us to go out to all of the kind of spreadsheet lovers out there and build them something that makes their job significantly easier when they run into things like the Daily Pulse? They can do that in 10 minutes as opposed to 3 weeks like I did.
It's interesting how not just in this space, but in so many industries, we we think that what needs to be built for the solution is like some futuristic, like meet the Jetsons type product. But oftentimes, like what you did here was people are already liking a particular like. There's very rare times you heard people absolutely hate a spreadsheet, right? Maybe they didn't like how maybe in depth or complicated some would end up getting, but you could really do anything in a spreadsheet. So you've taken this concept and like we're going to improve upon it. And one of the ways that you're doing that was with the concept of live data connections, right? Which that really made a spreadsheet a game changer for analysts. So in the early days when you were putting this together, like what challenges did you encounter for this feature specifically? Because you made this very user friendly and reliable, and that is not an easy thing. So, and then how did it fundamentally alter the workflow for finance teams as a result?
Yeah. Well, I think you hit on something really important. So the idea behind equals isn't, we're not the first to try it. Many people have had an idea of like, hey, let's rebuild the spreadsheet, or let's rethink the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet should have X, Y, Z superpowers. And so again, we're not the first team to try to do that. I think the thing that set us really apart, and one of the biggest challenges in the beginning, was sticking to the spreadsheet. And so when Ben and I started the company, one of the first things we wrote down was equals needs to work exactly like Excel. Exactly like Excel. Like the formulas, the keyboard shortcuts, how to do a pivot table, how to create a chart, everything is exactly like Excel. Like you should be able to jump into the tool and it's familiar to the point where you can copy and paste things out of Excel and have it work. And one of the things that we had to hammer home, I mean, we talked about it so every week in our all hands for the first year and a half of the company, we were 6, 7, 8 people. Every time we bring on an engineer, we'd have to remind them, we are not changing anything about the spreadsheet. I don't want to hear a single different way. I don't want to hear one idea on how a pivot table should be different, could be better. It's not. We're not changing it at all on any dimensions. And so I think a lot of failed attempts before, people get kind of creative and clever about, let's change the way formulas work, or this slight thing needs to be revisited in a slightly different way. But that then creates a hurdle for somebody getting into the product. It's like you have so much muscle memory around how a spreadsheet works that if you run into like a formula works in a slightly different way, it's going to drive you nuts. And so we had to really, really stick to that. But that's been one of the things that our users and early customers have really appreciated. On the data side, which I think is kind of where your specific question went, I think the hardest thing for us over the past couple of years has been not everybody's data is structured in the same way. In fact, everybody's data is structured differently. You can say it that way. And data is a mess. And a lot of the problem with building a tool that's kind of upstream, a consumption tool for data, is you're solely dependent on how good somebody's data and how useful somebody's data is. And so we have probably one of the biggest surprises with equals has been how much time and energy we've had to invest in making our data connections. So we connect to SQL databases, which a SQL database is really up to the customer and kind of how they set it up. But we also connect to SaaS tools. So we connect to Stripe and Salesforce and HubSpot and QuickBooks and NetSuite and you name it. And while we know the schema that somebody is bringing, we know the schema that Stripe sends us or the schema that QuickBooks sends us, oftentimes that's not useful to the customer. They need it in a specific way that matches their business. And so we've had to invest a ton of time and energy. And this is probably the thing that I didn't foresee. This is the biggest challenge that I did not foresee in starting Equals. We've had to spend a lot of time helping people get their data into a format that they understand it, that when they pull something, they recognize it, they know that they're working with data that's correct, and they know how to work with it. And so we've just had a lot of user interviews, a lot of manually onboarding folks, a lot of building things for people so we understand the data sets, and then turning that into kind of abstractions that we can then give to people that they can use.
In building this company, what's been your biggest like what the heck type moment that you're like either it's a funny moment that you can laugh at now but maybe you cried at the time. This is one of the things I love asking founders because everyone says I can laugh at it now but I cried at the time. What moment was that for you, I guess, if you had to narrow it down to one?
Okay, to one. Well, we're very famous for our story of trying freemium. That was a thing that. So the story there goes: we launched Equals. Equals was the very first iteration of Equals. We onboarded every single customer manually, and it was not free. You had to pay to get in. Then we opened up a self-serve channel by which you put your credit card in, and you could get started with Equals. But again, you couldn't use it without starting a trial or paying. And then we raised a Series A off of that. We grew in 5 months. We went from launch to Series A. So it was awesome. Closed the Series A. And I'm like, you know what? Equals is just like Notion and Airtable and Canva and these like bottoms up PLG self-service tools. We should have a pricing model just like them. We should be free. Everybody should be able to sign up and use Equals. Makes total sense. So I called up the Series A investor. It's like, sorry, I know we just raised the A from you, but we're going to slash prices. We're going to introduce a free tier. We're going to take our ARR. We're going to basically just like cut our ARR by a whole bunch. And, the plan that we'd set forth, we're going to completely change. And we're going to try to make this freemium bottoms up kind of PLG motion work. It didn't work. For like, I don't know, man, like 9 months, I was like banging with my head on the wall, like, what the fuck have I done?
But any day now.
Yeah, I'm like waiting for like a minute. The signups kind of like it took off, but then we didn't have the top of funnel to support it. There's so many lessons here. We hadn't kind of figured out the specific use cases by which people could use Equals or should use Equals, or why they should use Equals, such that we couldn't really onboard people in a proper way. They'd get in, they'd kind of play around, but then never come back. And we just weren't able to like convert people. And so it was, the business really struggled. And it was one of those moments where I was really grateful we'd raised the Series A and we'd given ourselves a bunch of runway to go figure this thing out. But man, if we'd kept down that path, I'm pretty sure the company wouldn't have worked. And so we wrote a blog post on it. It did pretty well. We famously kind of turned off freemium. The business almost instantly bounced back. It's pretty wild. Just the act of making people pay also adds a certain amount of urgency and cuts through the kind of the noise of everybody that otherwise would be asking for things, and really helped us focus on who we should be working with. And we even went back, and we're still here now, to manually onboarding every single customer. We require you to jump on a call with us to understand what you're trying to do to help you. We have plans to kind of work back towards a self-serve motion, but it's been so valuable to talk to people, to understand what they're trying to do, to narrow down our use cases. So free was the one where sometimes I look at it still and I'm like, fuck, we'd be like 9 months further along if we'd never done that. But I had to. It was an itch I had to scratch. If I hadn't have done it, it'd been bothering me forever.
Live and learn, though, right?
100%.
It's that's funny. Well, funny now, probably not funny at the time. So that's why it's a laugh now, cried at the time moment. Interesting. Well, can you talk us through kind of what frameworks that you have productized that you believe have helped the company grow?
Yeah. One has been, this is one we've kind of recently figured out, and I touched on a little bit on this on the freemium story, but this pertains to equals. It doesn't necessarily, well, I think there's lessons for every founder in it. Equals is a particularly hard product to build and take to market because it's insanely horizontal. And by horizontal, I mean it spans so many different use case and buyers, right? When we first launched Equals, we're a next generation spreadsheet. We're a spreadsheet connected to data. And even if I tell you it's a spreadsheet connected to SQL with Salesforce and Stripe and HubSpot and Google Analytics and QuickBooks and the range of the amount of people that serves and the ways in which it can be used are nearly infinite, right? Like it's a tool for finance people. It's a tool for a founder. It's a tool for a marketer. It's a tool for a sales ops person. It's a tool for a salesperson. And so we spent almost the first 2 years of Equals. The vision for Equals was like, let's build the spreadsheet, the next gen spreadsheet. So we were trying to take this thing to market in that way. And we spent the first 2 years just talking to a dizzying number of prospects across a huge range of different ways in which they wanted to use Equals. So I'd jump on calls with people, or I'd talk to customers or users, and they were like, oh, one day it'd be a finance person at a Series A startup, another day it'd be a founder, another day it'd be a rev ops person, another day it'd be a marketer at a digital marketing agency wanting to automate the campaign analyses they do for their customers. Another day it'd be like a Shopify business owner. Another day it'd be a product manager who wanted to like work with like our Amplitude connector. Another day it'd be like a manager at a school district who like believe it or not, they like have SQL databases and they run analyses on students that they share with their principals or with their teachers. DJs at radio stations use spreadsheets to automate their playlists. Like the universe is almost infinite. And it was in going through that and that I've then had to think very meticulously and rigorously about who is Equals for and what is it for, and in what ways for those use cases are we better than any alternative out there. And it's been in clarifying that we've now been able to get really sharp on our marketing message. So build a story that we can tell to the world in a repeatable way, find leads that match that story in a repeatable way, work those deals in a way that's, again, repeatable. Like we know when a lead comes in that looks like this is what we do. And this is the process that we run them through. And this is how you sell to them, and then onboard them in a repeatable way. And that's made such a difference. It's made it so much easier. But as a founder, I found it really hard to kind of think that way in the beginning because it felt like I was almost giving up a part of our vision. It was like, oh, if we go narrow and we try to focus on a specific use case, and if that then becomes our message to the world, well, what about all these other things that we want to do and all these other things that we could be? And it felt like the outcome of the company could be smaller if that's the direction we went in. And it wasn't until I realized that actually if you want to get to that big vision, you have to go small step by small step. And so now I think a lot more about what are the kind of bricks that we need to lay in our business that get us to the big vision, but that we can kind of take one step at a time.
I think it's important, though, to have the approach that you initially did. Like you had to go through that because too often early on, like companies don't go through that initial part of thinking even more broadly because it gives you like you just said, so many lessons that you learned as a result of trying to maybe go super broad early on. It kind of goes the other way too, right? There's companies out there that start maybe super narrow early on, and then they think they can maybe build into a bigger market, and it isn't a bigger market, and they maybe spent too much. So I think either way you look at it, you have to go through those growing pains of either you start super narrow and then you have to try to expand, or how you did it, you think super broadly and then you say, okay, we need to actually focus a little bit on these different areas to see what scales. But that whole, yeah.
Like I appreciate you saying that so much because it's so true. And one of the things I say is like, we had to go, exactly what you said, we had to go through that experience. And it was actually in that experience that we were able to find the use case that now works for us. And it was, I would never have, we would, we wouldn't have picked that use case to begin with. Let me say it that way. And so um, we had to kind of see that that was the thing that was really valuable for customers. And then we had to go back and talk to a few others and, oh, wow, you guys do that? Okay, cool. Yeah, I'd love that. And then, holy shit, okay, that's amazing. Okay. And then it kind of like built from there, but we had to be open to all the different use cases to start off with. And so we had to go through that experience for sure.
When I talk with founders and I hear about who's backing them, immediately we know who the not great investors are when they don't allow you to go through that process too. When they want you to whenever you have the investors, right, that want everything to necessarily be perfect early on, those are probably not the investors that you want to be working with. So it's interesting to hear what you went through, and I'm sure your investors were understanding. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that was the case.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really fortunate to have raised from the team at Kraft and the team at Andreessen and Horowitz are both the partners that we've worked with there, given us a ton of freedom, a ton of leeway, trusted us to kind of figure it out, supported us, nudged us in different ways, but also, yeah, this is the type of thing that you have to go through. You have to figure it out. You have to internalize it. You have to deeply understand it for yourself. Nobody can tell you this. And then once you understand it yourself, then you can act on it, and then it becomes powerful.
My last question for you, Bobby, as we wrap up here, is what role do you see equals playing in kind of the evolution of financial modeling and forecasting? And kind of part two of that, how do you see the role of and needs of finance teams changing in the next few years? So kind of align those two.
Yeah. So I think for me, equals is, I'm not a believer in it takes some convincing to get me to a place where the art of modeling, and I use the word art explicitly because it is an art, is like fully automated and taken over by by machines or by AI or by, there's so much of it that's so much of it that's contextual, that's so much of it that comes from not just your understanding of the business, but your understanding of the stakeholders that you're presenting it to, your understanding of how things are going to be consumed, how your model is it's how you communicate how the business is working to the company. And so it's not just like cells here, inputs here, output here. It's like the whole flow of how the business works and how people understand it to work. And so humans have to be involved in that. There has to be a process of, there are good models and there are bad models, and they're usually associated just how well somebody has thought through the business and how well they understand it. And so the way I think about equals is a tool that just bolsters the human who is building that thing. And so we want to do all the things that make it really easy for them to do their craft, build their art. So whether it's automating data pulls or making it really easy for them to share, to just delighting them along every kind of experience of actually building the model itself. But I leave it to people to actually do that, because I think that's the thing that we are best at, and that's the thing that makes for the best models. And so equals I view as like the kind of tool that how do we build it in a way that makes it really fun and joyful and delightful and fast and easy to go and build that model. And then I think that kind of fits really nicely with the direction of the way that finance teams are heading. Finance teams are kind of finance leaders have to start thinking. And that is, I'm a big believer that finance folks are, they have to be highly strategic. They have to understand the business. They have to think about themselves as like almost growth people, not as people who are holding teams accountable or saying no, or just the people that kind of count the money and, keep the business on its tracks. And so all of the things that people traditionally think about around finance, whether it's accounting, accounts payable, accounts receivable, payroll, all those things will get kind of automated away. They will get taken out by software, by AI, and so what's left is how somebody can actually understand and conceptualize and understand the business within themselves. That's the direction finance people need to go in. And the more you can do that, the more you can practice that, the better off you're going to be in the future as a finance professional. And then maybe the last thing I'll say on that front is I actually think startups are the best kind of microcosm for that. So I think I'm biased, but I was the first finance hire at Intercom. I joined when the company was 20 people. And I think the thing that made me successful in that role was I thought about that job as my only responsibility in the company is to tell the rest of the company how the business works and come up with ideas for how we should make the business work better. And if I can do that, then I've done my job. I don't care about all the other back office stuff. Somebody needs to do it and it'll get done. And if it doesn't get done, somebody will scream, probably, I hope. But my job is figure out how the business works, teach everybody else how it works, because the more people understand how it works, the more ideas we'll have about how to make it better. The more ideas we have for how to make it better, the faster the thing will grow, the more likely we'll have a business, and a business we're all proud of and excited about. That's the role of finance.
Mic drop, right? You need a mic for that. Bobby, I've really enjoyed our conversation here today. Love your energy. Love when you start telling a story too, your eyes like really light. So I love this is why I love the video component whenever we do the interviews. And look forward to future conversations and wishing you and the team the best of luck. But thank you so much for coming on the show here today.
Thanks, Jared. This was fun.